This is the Great Legend, and I am coming at you live with a live video tonight. And the topic of the night is, do you know the Marvel Age? That's right, fans. We're talking about the Marvel Age here tonight on the Great Legend Show. Wanting to get your feedback. Want to tell you my personal feedback on what I think the Marvel Age is. So it's great to be here, and it's great to be live with all of you here in the chat room right now. Do you know the Marvel Age? Now, if you look back at the history of Marvel, we know originally, and I'm not going to give you many of the years because I don't want to butcher anything. This is live. I haven't really thought about this too much. I don't have an outline. I don't have a game plan. But I want to talk to you tonight about the Marvel Age. What do you hear when you hear the word the Marvel Age? You know, a lot of people use that term, the Marvel Age. Well, what is the Marvel Age? For me, everyone has their own opinion about the Marvel Age. Is the Marvel Age when the first Iron Man movie came out? Is that the Marvel Age? Well, in a way, yes, it is. It's the Marvel Age of how a studio ought to do superhero movies. You know what I'm saying? Because they've been very popular. So there's a lot of different ways to look at this subject, and we're going to look at some of those ways here tonight. I don't want to take too much of your time, but I'm just giving you a little food for thought. And, you know, if you have a response video you want to make to this video, what you think the Marvel Age is, or your history, or what your opinions are, go right ahead, you know, make your response video. Put it in the comments below when this thing is not live no more and it's on the rewind. So fans, do you know the Marvel Age? We know years ago, like I said, my dates are kind of crappy, but maybe in the 30s, what we know of now as Marvel Comics, owned by, of course, Disney, was called Timely Comics. Y'all may know this old story of two old geezers. Well, they're dead geezers now, but I'm drinking some sweet tea right now. But anyway, Joe Simon, Jack Kirby, the creators of Captain America Comics. You know, the classic image of Captain America punching Adolf Hitler in the face. All that good stuff. Remember that? It's a good issue. I don't have it, but it looks cool. And then, you know, in the 50s or so, or, you know, 40s to 50s, Timely changed its name to Atlas Comics. The 50s were a time of, well, 40s and 50s were a lot of time of a lot of changes in the comic book industry. We look back at the early times, the golden age, if you will, of comics. We had Timely put out Captain America. They put out Namor the Submariner. They put out the Robot Human Torch, and a lot of other cool comics as well. But those were hero comics, those three guys. Fawcett was really big on some of their heroes, their Golden Age heroes. Like, I think, I don't really know any other than my boy Captain Marvel, you know, a.k.a. Billy Batson. National Comics, which would later become DC, they had Superman in Action Comics #1. That was really good. What a great superhero. You have a comic book title called Action Comics #1, and then they throw Superman in it. And let me tell you something. You want some action, you put Superman in a comic book, there'll be some action. They had a comic, National had one called Detective Comics, which was, you know, detective stories, you know, police stories, you know, things like that, trying to find out who did it and everything, like old-timey detectives. American versions, I would say, of like Sherlock Holmes type stuff. But, you know, the American versions, like what American detectives were doing in those early days. And then in issue 27, they had a cool detective with a cool costume named Batman. Very cool indeed. So you had those three companies doing some golden age goodness there, superhero stuff. 40s come along, you start getting some wartime, so you have your superheroes in the wartime. Captain America was still really big. Captain Marvel was beating Captain Nazi's ass. Superman was doing his thing. And then you got into the 50s, and, you know, you started seeing some stuff like some more war comics, 40s and 50s, some more war comics like I don't remember when the Howling Commandos came out, or Nick Fury and the Howling Commandos. That may have been some Silver Age. But, Joe Kubert, Sergeant Rock, the creator of Hawkman, he created Sergeant Rock for National, a.k.a. DC, in the 50s. So started doing a lot of war stuff. There was an old TV show called Combat. I bought my dad the complete series of that. The war stuff was going on. They had romance stuff. The 50s had the science fiction. They had the horror books, Tales from the Crypt. EC Comics had the Tales from the Crypt, Vault of Horror, Weird Science, things like that. And then when you had the breaking point, we get up to about 1958. Oh, let me tell you, National also had, aka Golden Age DC. They had Alan Scott, Green Lantern. They had Jay Garrick, Flash. And those are the only two I can think of right now. Well, of course, they had Superman, Batman, right? So what a guy by the name of Carmine Infantino did, he wanted to bring back some superhero books. So we go to 1958 at a book called Showcase Presents #4. Showcase presents a guy by the name of Flash, the fastest man alive, the first appearance of Barry Allen. And we know Barry Allen's big day because if you turn on the CW, you got Barry Allen on there. So Carmine Infantino, to me, over at DC, he's the guy that, to me, started that Silver Age, a rebirth, if you will, of superheroes and superheroes in comic books. They've always had Captain Marvel. We know him today as Shazam. He kind of got screwed over during the big lawsuit, saying that the big red cheese looked like the big blue Boy Scout, so aka too similar to Superman. So that kind of held him up, and basically kind of, through the years, made Fawcett Publications fold, because they lost the big red cheese, aka Captain Marvel Shazam. They lost him. But man, what a good time it was. I wish I was collecting back then. But we get to that Silver Age, 1958, like I said, Showcase #4. We had Barry Allen, which was a reintroduction of an old superhero from the Golden Age, the Flash from the Golden Age. He wore them blue pants, that red sweatshirt with the lightning bolt on it, and that little silver tin hat with the wings on there. That was Jay Garrick Flash. But we fast forward, like I said, to 1958, Barry Allen. And at that time, Stan Lee and Kirby were doing their thing over at Marvel. By this time, it was called Marvel Comics, named after one of the early Golden Age books, which was Marvel Comics #1. They were over there doing books like science fiction, big monsters coming out of the ground, destroying the buildings and invading, and then you'd have tanks come in and army soldiers try to kill these big monsters. So they had a lot of like monster kind of books, big time monsters like Godzilla. Not saying like they did Godzilla King of Monsters, or bringing back King Kong from 1931 or whenever the King Kong movie, the original King Kong movie was, the claymation looking thing. Mighty Joe Young, the black and white original Mighty Joe Young, which was a really good movie, but if you ever saw the remake of Mighty Joe Young, it sucked horribly. I hate that, but that's a different topic for a different day. But back to the shit I'm talking about. Big ass monsters. Stan Lee and Kirby doing big ass monsters, things like that. Well, their boss came to them and said, hey, DC over there is bringing back some of their heroes, like this Flash, and then later on in Showcase 22, they would bring back Green Lantern, but this time it's all about Hal Jordan, the battery, the Lantern battery, things like that. The old guy had a battery too, but, different kind of storyline, and that's where you get, I think for Green Lantern as a whole, I mean, once Hal Jordan hit the scene, I think a lot of people forgot about old Alan Scott. But anyway, so Marvel, he came to them, and I don't remember the boss's name. Captain Strangelove would know that. But the bosses came to Stan Lee and said, hey, I want you to write us some superhero comics. Because the thing is, for me, the only thing I remember Marvel ever did of superheroes was Captain America, Namor, and the robot Human Torch, which was in the 30s into the 40s and stuff like that. They hadn't touched superhero comics in a long time because at that time, The other side had Batman, they had Superman, they had Wonder Woman. They had some big time, big leaguers, big leagues down there. Aquaman. I think at that time Aquaman was kicking Namor's ass as far as like, you know, the water superhero. So they wanted to reinvent in their own Marvel, you know, thing. They wanted to reinvent superhero comics, and so if the Silver Age started in 1958 by Carmine Infantino, the Marvel Age started in November of 1961 with the release of my favorite comic, Fantastic Four #1. And to me, that is the birth. November 1961, that comic book I have in the closet over there, that issue #1 of the Fantastic Four. To me, my opinion, remember my opinion, that's the birth of the Marvel Age. Now, right now, I'm going to check the comments, and we're going to see how everyone's doing. We do have 7 live viewers at the moment, and I want to thank you so much for joining us live. And I want to ask you in the comments, do you know the Marvel Age? So if you have questions for me, concerns, anything you want to talk about, I'm checking you out right now, and I'm giving the shout-outs like I always do. #1, late nights, you'll find him here on the tube. It is Comic Noob. Comic Noob, thank you so much for joining us. One of my favorite guys to talk to here in the comic book community. I've become good, close friends with him. Next up, we got DB in the house. David Benavidez. Hey, David, it is great to see you. We have next up none other than the spectacular one, Spider Grandpa. All supermen matter. Amen to that. Hashtag it, baby. And we have Mr. Gretzky 9966. He says, "Long live Kurt Swan." A lot of a lot of people remember Kurt Swan. Kurt Swan did a lot of awesome art on The Adventures of Superboy, where you will find Crypto's first appearance in one of those issues. Mr. Gretzky says 9966. Isn't Alan Scott gay now? Gay lives matter. And they do in comic books as well. They did make Alan Scott gay. Yes, they did. But who's to know? Could he have been gay in 1934? I don't know if he was out in 1934. That'd be a damn good guess and a damn good rhyme if he was, though. But thank y'all so much. Flash is my DC. Mr. Gretzky, Flash is my favorite DC character along with Hourman. Let me ask you, Mr. Gretzky, where monsters dwell. DB knows what it's all about. Flash, are you talking Jay Garrick, the Golden Age Flash with the tin hat? Or are you talking about Barry Allen? Or maybe even a mixture of both? We'll get to that answer here in a minute or two. But back to the Marvel Age. They created Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Stan the Man Lee and Jack the King Kirby, as we would know them to become in the future of the comic book industry. They created the Fantastic Four. Now, Stan was a hard man. He wanted to do his own thing. You know, he said, well, I don't know about all this superheroes stuff, you know. Let me try out something that I haven't seen before. Stan says, let me write something that I haven't seen before. And what we'll do is we'll put a big-ass monster, you know, on the cover. And if it screws up, we could still fall back on these big-ass monsters. So instead of going with a solo hero or, you know, a solo person, superhero, they decided to go with a quartet. And we know that to be the Fantastic Four, the first family of comics. But were they really the first family? I have a comic book called The Marvel Family #1 that begs to differ. Had a guy by the name of Captain Marvel, Billy Batson. They had a guy by the name of Captain Marvel Jr., Freddie Freeman. They had a girl named Mary Marvel. Don't know what her last name was in the Golden Age, but it's Mary Batson today. And they had Uncle Marvel. God, I can't remember his name. Big nose. Looked funny, though. That was kind of like, I think that could have been the first thing. But no, we know the first family. We know them as the Fantastic Four. Started in 1961. So let me tell you about this. Would this make this book, this, like it's a Silver Age book, right? You know, in the 60s, 58 on up to the 70s, aka the Bronze Age, but it's the 60s. This would be Silver Age. But it has Stan Lee's input all over it. And of course the awesome art by Jack Kirby. I mean, he really brought that monsters and all that stuff to life in the 50s and stuff. But we call it the Marvel Age, and I'm going to go over some stuff with you, and I'm going to tell you what the Marvel Age means to me. And a lot of you out there have heard me talk about the Marvel Age before. Starting with 1961, the Fantastic Four. What did we have? We have a big battle, but we get the origin story. Four friends, you know, a guy by the name of Reed Richards, his college roommate, who was a big athletic guy named Ben Grimm. We had Reed's girlfriend, Sue Storm, and her kid brother, Johnny Storm. And Reed's really good. Ben was a fighter pilot, and they go on a mission up in space. They get struck down by a cosmic storm. The word cosmic rays, cosmic storm. We later learn about Marvel in the cosmic, we could even go cosmic age. Silver Surfer, Thanos, Skrulls, Kree, all of those people, Gladiator, all the space characters that Marvel created started 1961 with two words: cosmic rays. That the ideas, the space ideas, the space race. You know, we would put a man on the moon in '69, but the space race was really big in the Silver Age. Anyone remember Alan Shepard, John Glenn? You know, and then finally in '69 they put Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin. Michael Collins was cold chilling up there. He didn't get to set foot on the moon, but he was there. He was in the house. You know, kind of like that Chinese Superman book I showed. You know, that one thug that was on the side. You know, they were there. But cosmic rays, cosmic age, Silver Surfer, blah 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 blah. But anyway, back to the Marvel Age. You know, I don't like getting off kilter, but with that Marvel Age, it started in Fantastic Four, and one of the things that Lee did with all of his stories, and give this man a lot of credit, because you know, whether you hate him or you know, you love him or hate him, you goddamn will respect the man for what he did. If he didn't do this, if he didn't do this Marvel Age, and if he would have kept writing monster books, I don't think Marvel would still be around today. I mean, they almost went broke and bust in the 90s. Their own fault. Printed too many damn foil covers. A lot of bullshit. But what Stan Lee did, if you look kind of at the 50s and you look at some of the old Golden Age books, what did you see in them? You mainly saw, for most of the pages, a person dressed up in a superhero costume. You know, you saw a hero dressed in a hero's costume. Superman in the red, blue. Batman in the gray and black, or you know, gray and blue, and the, you know, it kind of went on. Aquaman in the orange and green. You saw a lot of these costumes, but you didn't get too much of the Bruce Wayne. You didn't get too much of the Clark Kent. You didn't get too much of the Diana, you know, the Wonder Woman. You mainly got them fighting, or you know, solving a crime if you're Batman, or kicking some ass. That's the way you got these heroes. You would have maybe like a 1 or 2 page beginning that would have something happen, like a bank robbery, or a mugging, or you know, someone's I don't know. They didn't get too violent in there. There was a lot of bank robberies, and then they would don the costume, fight, and do all the crap in the costume, and then you get to the last page or two, and then, you know, they may take off the mask, or Clark will put the glasses back on, and then there you go. But in the Marvel Age in '61, Fantastic Four, you got to see a lot of that stuff behind the scenes. You had 4 people that lived together in the same building, aka the Baxter Building, save the top floors for the Fantastic Four and all their cool inventions. Fantastic car on the roof, you know, Roby the robot, and you would see all of those things come to life, but you would see those 4 people not as the Fantastic Four. You would see them as Reed, Ben, Sue, and Johnny. Do you have any favorite Marvel superheroes you like, Little Jackson? Like, or any superheroes? What's some of your favorite superheroes? Who's on your shirt right there? Iron Man. That's right. You like Batman too, right? You and about a million other people. All right, close the door on your way out, buddy. So, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about that guy named Iron Man and you know, Bruce Banner and Matt Murdock and so many people about this Marvel age. So, but we saw the Fantastic Four as a family first, superheroes second. You got to see in the early issues how they were going to pay for rent. Normal everyday problems. A lot of us every month we wonder that question. We ask ourselves that question ourselves. This month, how are we going to pay for DirecTV, electric bill, AT&T, those assholes who own DirecTV now, monopoly ass bastards. Who's another one? Water bill, and if you pay on your car, or if you do your your home loan, or you rent your home, how are you going to pay for these bills? So we got to see that. It wasn't just like the normal way we escape, where we're watching Superman, taking the glasses off, going to the phone booth, getting dressed, and flying away and doing all that stuff. And he worked at the Daily Planet. We got a little BS filler from Jimmy Olsen. I know, a little bullshit. Props to Jimmy Olsen, little red-haired Archie-looking ass guy. But we got to see some of that, but not as much as we saw in the Fantastic Four. First time you really got to see a family come together. And it's some shit that Marv Wolfman, who wrote for the Fantastic Four, took a lot of the shit he did and what Stan Lee did, and Marv Wolfman took that fundamentals, big fundamental, Tim Duncan, San Antonio Spurs, retired. Anyway, you see that kind of stuff, and Marv Wolfman went and created a comic called The Teen Titans. Let's have a bunch of teens together. They have their little headquarters. How are they going to get along with each other? A la Fantastic Four. Marv Wolfman and who is it? George Perez, I believe. But so yeah, you got to see that with Fantastic Four, and Fantastic Four fans was a huge success. People loved it. People liked seeing behind the scenes. I mean, if you go to the early issues, Reed Richards got one of them Sherlock Holmes pipes. Man, he was representing back in the day. Next up, who comes on the scene? We have another great story. A young high school student named Peter Parker. Amazing Fantasy 15. We all know that book. That's Spider-Man's first appearance. Beautiful cover. Jack Kirby on the cover. For some reason, they just didn't like Ditko's cover art for that one. But beautiful interiors by Steve Ditko. Anyone can draw a Spider-Man. We've had thousands of artists do Spider-Man, but there was only one guy that could do a Peter Parker, and that was Steve Ditko. And man, if you go back and look at some of the early 60s Steve Ditko art of the human faces, not just pull a mask over, you look at those human faces, him and Jack Kirby. Gotta love Kirby, gotta give Kirby, because Kirby's king. But man, the faces of just the normal, everyday people, Ditko did an excellent job, and Peter Parker looked really damn good. So props. But what makes Spider-Man Marvel Age? Well, you get to see, okay, so we had Fantastic Four, and through science, cosmic rays, unidentified phenomenons, UFO crap, they got powers from that. I'm sorry if I missed out on that, because the Marvel Age isn't necessarily about the powers or the superhero as it is the person that has the powers and the costume. But with Peter Parker, we all know the story. He gets bit by a radioactive spider. Radioactive. Write that word down. Because before Peter Parker and Amazing Fantasy came along, I don't think people in the 60s really knew what radioactive was. Now, years later, through pollution and people dumping shit, nuclear waste into our waters, yeah, you drink that shit, you get cancer, you die. That's some radioactive bullshit is what that is. But back in the day, Peter Parker got bit by a radioactive spider, and it didn't hurt him. He may have had a fever, whatever, the first night, but then next day, he woke up with some amazing, keyword there, amazing powers, and people all thought it was a fantasy, keyword fantasy. And what do we have? We have Amazing Fantasy. So that little story fit the Amazing Fantasy comic, and that was an adult comic, or more for the adults to read before that, because a lot of times it'll say adult Amazing Fantasy on it, on some of those earlier issues pre number 15. So we have an amazing story about a teenager that gets bit by a radioactive spider. His uncle dies. Great power comes great bullshit. And he has to, don the suit and, man up and take the reins. And he has to grow up a little faster because his uncle, his father figure, is dead. Now he has to help his poor, widowed aunt. And what is that? That doesn't sound like Superman, whipping that ass with heat vision and blowing cold breath. That sounds like real world, first world problems. How am I going to help my aunt pay for groceries when she can't even work herself? Because the money coming in, the benefits and all that from retirement, they ain't paying shit in the old days. So Spider-Man, as a young kid, he's just going to school right now, but he has to go get him a job working for an asshole. Who works for an asshole? Actually, I don't. I love you, Lynette. But who's worked for an asshole before? I have. I worked for plenty of assholes. And J. Jonah Jameson was a complete asshole. Marvel Age, baby. Not necessarily looking at the superheroes, but the people behind the mask. So we've gone over Fantastic Four. We've gone over Spider-Man. Let's check the comments and see what y'all are going on with. Spectacular Spider-Grandson. I learned about radiation from Fallout. Yeah, you damn right. Damn straight. Comic book villain Gil in the house. Loving it. I'm glad you're here. Kelly Galloway, my main man 1Z Angelique, representing behind the scenes as KG. Not Kevin Garnett of the famous Timberwolves, but my boy 1Z Angelique. Who dat? Russell's in the house. Hashtag J-Rocks in the house. Carlos is here. Evan is in the house. So it's great to see all y'all new viewers here live. We're talking about the Marvel Age and what you feel, what do you think of when you hear the Marvel Age? And I'm going to talk a little more. I'm not going to go in chronological order of what when heroes came out or when heroes came to be, but we're going to talk a little bit about a lot of Silver Age Marvel heroes, aka the Marvel Age. Let's do one. Let's go with a guy that was a scientist. Now, I told you about radioactive spiders. What if we have a different kind of radiation? How about one that we know of called gamma radiation? And the ways that we can make gamma into different lights, like gamma rays. Keyword rays. When have we heard rays before? Cosmic rays. Gamma rays. You know what I'm saying? You get the shit? You following it along? It's the Marvel Age. It's aging. How we grow a simple family of four into the greatest comic company of all time. Up until about the New 52, because I think DC Stories currently, in my opinion, I think DC Stories, DC writing, DC art is better than Marvel's right now. Just my opinion. So we take gamma rays. This guy gets hit by the gamma rays, and he turns in to his alter ego, which is the Hulk, or just Hulk. And then we go on to, I think it was Tales to Astonish, maybe? Tales of Suspense, Tales to Astonish, and I think it's Astonish. We had Hulk in there, and then they call it the Incredible Hulk. And he got his own series or whatnot. So we have a guy by the name of Bruce Banner. And he is a smart doctor. A very smart doctor. But through science, again, what happens? He develops powers. Now, these are powers that he cannot control, not until, reiterations and writing and things like that. We see Mark Ruffalo, he can turn to Hulk on a dime currently in the Marvel movie universe, Marvel Cinematic Universe, the MCU, you know, for some of you geeks, freaks and geeks out there, MCU, I know y'all like acronyms, but he can control it. But back then, it was Bill Bixby, you wouldn't like me when I'm angry. You know what I'm saying? And boom, what happened to Bill Bixby when someone pissed him off or done him wrong? And they pissed him off every episode, because when he got pissed, he turned into Lou Ferrigno, and then Lou Ferrigno beat that ass. He changed back to Bill Bixby. Bill had to get another shirt and a new pair of pants, throw the backpack over. Da-na-na-na, 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 and then he fucking had to go hitchhike again till the next episode. So we had a guy named Bruce Banner turned into the Incredible Hulk. A lot of his stories, sure, Hulk was whipping that ass, but who was behind that? Who was behind the Hulk? Bruce Banner. And a lot of times, I think fans, we didn't get a lot of Bruce Banner like we did with the Fantastic Four or Peter Parker. You know, we got more Hulk, but we did see Bruce go through a lot of trials and turbulences because he wanted to get that Hulk out of his system. Now, let's break away from the science and shit like that, and let's talk about something that was huge. Freaking huge. And I don't remember the year. It could have been 63, 64. I don't really remember. I'm not a big fan of this team. But let's take a lot of people, like normal everyday people, and when they hit puberty, they have a certain gene, something, a gene, like genes, like DNA. They have something in their sequencing that make them do amazing things, uncanny things. If you see where I'm going with this? And we have the uncanny X-Men. So, kids hit puberty. A guy by the name of Scott Summers. I don't know how it happened. I don't know the true origin, but one day he woke up and this red shit started coming out of his eyes and stuff. He just went crazy. Jean Grey, she started hearing things. People thought she was cuckoo. Bobby Drake, he started getting the cold feelings. Beast, man, he had amazing athletic ability, and his feet and hands were kind of like gorilla-ish. Who else am I missing? And a guy who grew angel wings. Can't even remember his name. The angel who would become Angel. God, I can't remember his name all of a sudden. That kind of sucks, but oh well. So I think he's the third, or Warren something, who was Angel. And they had two elderly guys. One that wanted to help these young kids who could listen to voices himself, and he can control people through it's not telekinesis. Jean Grey had a little telekinesis, but Charles Xavier was able to talk to him through thoughts. I don't remember the word for that. But anyways, Stan Lee came up with that. And of course, we also had Magneto's first appearance in there as well. And we know as him as he wanted revenge because the Germans messed his family up, gassed him, whatever you want to call it. So you had something like that that had never been done in comics, I don't believe. So this X genome was very cool. It was uncanny. It was crazy. But they made a comic out of it. It was X-Men. And what we got to see, what did we get to see Charles Xavier do? He ran a school for the gifted and talented. School for the gifted, whatever. But you got to see those kids grow up under the tutelage. Kind of like the Regulators grew up under John Tunstall. You know, Regulators mount up. But we got to see Charles Xavier teach these kids how to not be cursed by their powers, but to use their powers for good, the good of humanity. And that was the Uncanny X-Men. So that was pretty amazing. And a lot of those, you know, they would get sent out on missions, kind of like, you know, you piss Hulk off, he goes kicks some ass, he comes back, he doesn't have a home, he just has his knapsack, he just da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. Anyway, so the X-Men actually had a place to go back to, whereas Thunderbolt Ross, aka the guy that would become the Red Hulk, had a hard-on to capture Bruce Banner through all those early issues of the Hulk, and I think he still has a hard on for him. But that's a different story for a different day. You know, go to this is YouTube. This ain't RedTube. You know what I'm saying? But now, how you doing? You got the legend fucking going now. You got 13 views, baby. But anyway, so I'm going to tell you another one real quick. Tales, is it of suspense or tales from suspense? We had a guy who created a suit. And I don't even know the true Silver Age origin story of this guy, but we can go with it. We can go with many stories. Through the power of science and robotics and building shit, this guy was a great builder. He built a suit to keep him alive. You know what I mean? To keep him going from day to day. And there's a lot of different things. And like I said, I don't know the full story of Tony Stark. I've never been a huge Avengers or Iron Man comic book fan because I grew up reading a lot of the Fantastic Four. But what you can do, if you look at that, it's a guy that used, we have a lot of Tony Stark stories in the Marvel age. Even where Marvel broke ground years later with alcoholism. And the classic iconic cover of Tony looking in the mirror at his shaggy face, his bloodshot eyes, and he notices in the mirror that, yeah, this ain't good. I'm an alcoholic. And that was really big for comics. And when you see yourself create something big, like a suit of armor, like Iron Man did, and you're using the suit of armor and you're partying because you're rich and you got Stark Industries and all that other kind of stuff, you know, it can go to your head sometimes. Now, a lot of those people that have that will become villains, but Tony battled through those demons in the bottle, the demon in the bottle. So there you go. You have real world situations coming into a comic book, real life drama coming into a comic book. And I think maybe that's why drama is so prevalent in the YouTube comic book community, because Stan Lee created a lot of drama through the Marvel age. Did Stan Lee intend for this drama to create bullshit in YouTube comic book community? Probably not. But anyway, it's an interesting thing to think about. So we've gone over so far some of the most awesome superheroes of the Silver Age. Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, Incredible Hulk, X-Men. And I haven't even got to Weapon X. I mean, look what they did to that guy. Damn. They took a mutant that has a healing genome, or an X gene, and they did scientific experiments on the guy. Crazy. I won't even go into Wolverine. But, and we had Tony Stark. You look at another scientist that, you know, had his own issues with the love of his life. Janet Van Dyne or whatever. Wasp. You had Ant-Man and Wasp. What did we see from them? Well, there's a comic book where we saw a man hitting a woman, or you know, what do we call that? Domestic disturbances. You know, some real life shit there where the man cares more about his science than he does the love of his life. He cares more about comic books than he does the love of his life. He cares more about his video games than the love of his life. He cares more about Skylanders, for all my little Skylander shits out there, instead of his loved ones. So you had Ant-Man. I'm not going to go into him. I'm just kind of telling you the story. Let's go to a little boy named Matt Murdock. Do we have Matt Murdock in the chat room? Let's check the chat. No, we don't, but that's okay. Why did they decide to change the color of Hulk from gray to green? I think I know, but I want to know if I'm right. That one right there, I believe the gray didn't show up very well on the issue 1. The inks of that, they didn't look really good. They decided to go with green because it would bring out the flesh tones a little bit easier than gray. What is gray? I don't have one right now. No, yes I do. The color of gray, right here. I don't know if you can see us. I don't even have my I haven't even had my camera on, or on where I can see my face. But what do you see? We got lead here. Color lead is gray. So pencilers are already penciling gray. And you know, you have an inker like probably Joe Sonat. I don't know who inked Hulk. Could be Dick Ayers. I don't really know. But I think that's why they went with green, because they could see the flesh tones a little better of green skin opposed to gray, because gray, well, look at that. Green ink is cheaper. Actually, I don't know. If you skip ink altogether and just use this for the whole gray Hulk, it might be cheaper. I don't know. But, well, just for the drawing, if you will. So I think maybe, Sarap, I think that's why Hulk is red now. Actually, that's Thunderbolt Ross doing some of his own experimenting, you know. The original guy that was trying to capture Bruce Banner. So let's go to a little guy named Matt Murdock. Okay, so Matt Murdock, little kid, has a freak accident. What happens? Radioactive. Keyword radioactive nuclear waste flies in his eyes. He becomes blind. But with radiation comes great radiation. With great radiation comes great radiation. Or something like that. I think Uncle Ben said it right. So the radioactive blinded his eyes, but gave all of his other perceptions, it multiplied him by 1,000% pretty much. And we have Daredevil. Now, Daredevil, Matt Murdock, is just a lawyer, plays it by the book by day, gets the vengeance by night. So I would say a lot of the Daredevil stuff, most of, I would say 25% to 30 to maybe 40% of the story, we'll see Matt Murdock wearing the shades with the walking stick. We'll see him do his thing, and then he dresses up in Daredevil. If someone gets off the hook in the courtroom, he hooks them on the top of a building rooftop and dangles them. He says, "You want to take advantage of people? Well, I'm taking advantage of you right now. What are you going to do about it?" And we have Daredevil. By the way, Netflix, shout outs to Netflix, Daredevil. Everyone watches it, everyone loves it, everyone buys and inflates the prices of Daredevil books. But thank God for Netflix. And then, so we talked about Daredevil. Let me think if I can think of any others. And in the comments, if you have any Silver Age Marvel heroes that you can think of, that would be pretty cool. Now, I don't want to talk about Dr. Donald Blake and how he picked up the hammer and then Thor came. I don't really know the whole Thor storyline of that kind of stuff, so I'm going to skip over him. And I think that's about all I want to go with. But we've mentioned a lot of heroes from the 60s, not the Silver Age to me, but what the Marvel Age is. The coming of age of Marvel Comics. That's what it is. The 1960s, that Silver Age that Carmine and Fantino did in 1958 was Showcase number 4. We see a coming of age for Marvel Comics. And that's with the creation of the Fantastic Four and subsequent heroes. And then later on, they would mash the heroes together. They would go into each other's books. When Fantastic Four number 12 came out in, I guess it was November of 62, give or take, Marvel Comics had their first crossover character. They had Incredible Hulk show up in the Fantastic Four book. During that same month, Amazing Spider-Man number 1 had come out, and Amazing Spider-Man number 1 had the Fantastic Four in that book. So both of those books tie for very first crossover of a hero from one book to a hero of another book. So I think that is pretty cool. So there was a lot of firsts that happened during this Marvel Age. Fantastic Four, number 4. We bring back the Submariner as a villain with amnesia. Fantastic Four, number 5, we have a guy that helped Reed Richards do some science. He got a disfigured face, became Dr. Doom, was bad guy. Fantastic Four, issue number 6, we have a very first. We have the first time 2 villains teamed up, and this is for Marvel books and Silver Age, Well, Marvel books, I believe, just Marvel. The first time two villains teamed up against some heroes, Doctor Doom manipulating Namor. So there was a lot of things that happened first with Marvel Comics, and a lot of that goes to Stan Lee, because he pretty much wrote all that stuff in the 60s. And you had great filler art by some of those guys, mainly the big two, Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko. And man, they made the comics look beautiful. Fans, that's what the Marvel Age means to me. And what we can look at here in YouTube comic book community, in my eyes, and I've told you this before, we watch people not for like the books or video games or what kind of tape you use on your comic books or on your packages. And I don't use this tape on my comic bags. I use this tape here. But it's the coming of age. It's not what we see in the videos that people are showing. It's the people behind the camera. It's the people underneath the facade. It's the people underneath the costume. That's what the Marvel Age is to me. Fans, this has been the Great Legend, talking about the Marvel Age. Do you know the Marvel Age? I just want to thank each and every one of you for watching me live. We've had a peak concurrent for the last 10 minutes or so of 14 viewers, which is excellent. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for that. And I want you to go through your collections and try to find those books where it's not necessarily about the superhero, but it's about the people underneath the mask, underneath the costume. And I want you to think about this video of, do you know the Marvel Age? And if you didn't know the Marvel Age, now you know the Marvel Age. Compliments from the Great Legend Show. I can't take all the credit. Stan wrote the books. I just read them. How you doing? Oh, it's a great time to be on YouTube, fans. Just remember, it's not about the books or what they show. It's about the personal stories. It's about the person, the smile, the hat, whatever. It's not, no. It's not about the smile. It's not about the hat. It's about the person. It's about Rob right here, R Dowdy 95, coming at you live, just like how I roll with it on the Great Legend Show. So fans, again, remember, what do you know about the Marvel Age? And hopefully on the rewind, after the thing is done, and after Daredevil is blind on the rewind, I stole that from J-Rocks, but you can comment below and think about it. Think about what you think the Marvel Age. Do you think it's just the Silver Age of Marvel Comics? Or do you think it's about all of those characters, the Matt Murdocks, the Bruce Banners, the Peter Parkers, the Reed Richards, the Tony Starks, the Ben Grimms? You know I had to throw my favorite thing in there. It's about all of that. So fans, this is the Great Legend for the Great Legend Show, saying peace out, God bless.